So thank you very much. We had a great meeting. There's great unity. Whether it's one bill or two bill, it's going to get done one way or the other. I think there's a lot of talk about two, and there's a lot of talk about one, but it doesn't matter. The end result is the same. We're going to get something done that's going to be reducing taxes and creating a lot of jobs and all of the other things that you know about. But this was a really unified meeting, and I want to thank John and everybody for. It was a great turnout. You know, this was came here for the funeral tomorrow. We went over to Blair House. I went over with First Lady. Met the Carter family. They were lovely. They were really very sad, but also they were celebrating because he was a very fine man. I knew him a little bit, but I knew him only as a fine man. Then we came here. We had a meeting, but it was a really good meeting, very strong, and we'll get something done. One bill, two bills doesn't matter to me. They're going to work that out, but the end result is going to be the same. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you. Have a big couple of days coming up, and then in a week and a half we have, I think, some really tremendous things happening. We have some really, I think it's going to set this country apart from all others. We do some great work. Any quick questions?
When could President day one? You have done some significant pushback from people. Greenland and Panama with comments. Would you consider sending U.S. troops in order to fly over those two territories?
Yeah, I don't think we had pushback. Greenland is, if you look at the people there, we got tremendous, we got applause as we landed yesterday. I had my representatives, my son Don, and representatives go there. And it was like a love fest, you know that. The Panama Canal, if they're taking advantage of it. They charge more for our ships than to do any other ships. They charge more for our Navy to go through. We built it. We gave it to them for $1. In other words, we gave it to them for nothing. The most expensive structure ever built in the history of our country, relatively speaking. The most by far. We lost 38,000 people. They gave it to them for $1, and then they charge more for our ships. It's not going to happen. And China's running the Panama Canal. That's not going to happen either.
Mr. President, on California, Mr. President, during the pandemic, you often said that you didn't believe that you should bail out blue states that you believe were being mismanaged. Given your criticism of Governor Gavin Newsom, are you willing to work with him, and do you believe that federal aid should be provided to California for as long as it takes?
Well, it's very sad because I've been trying to get Gavin Newsom to allow water to come. You'd have tremendous water up there. They send it out to the Pacific because they're trying to protect a tiny little fish, which is in other areas, by the way, called a smelt. And for the sake of a smelt, they have no water. They had no water in the fire hydrants today in Los Angeles. It was a terrible thing. And we're going to get that done. It's going to finally be done. I got it done from the federal side, and he didn't want to sign it, but it's not going to happen again like that. There's no reason. Can you imagine? You have farmers that don't have any water in California. They have plenty of water. They don't have a drought. They send it out to the Pacific, and it's crazy. So what's happening in California is a true tragedy. I know those areas very well. I have many friends living in those houses. That is a true tragedy. Nobody ever thought. I mean, virtually Beverly Hills and areas around Beverly Hills are being decimated. The biggest homes, some of the most valuable homes in the world are just destroyed. I don't even know. You know, you talk about a tax base. If those people leave, you're going to lose half your tax base of California. This is a true tragedy, and it's a mistake of the governor, and you could say the administration. They don't have any water. They didn't have water in the fire hydrants. They don't have water. And yet they have, the water comes from, you know where? Up north. And it comes down at levels, they give millions and millions of barrels of gallons of water that they have, and they send it out into the Pacific. For the Pacific, it's like a drop, it's nothing. But for California, it would take care of the whole state. So what's happened is a tragedy, and the governor has not done a good job. With that being said, I got along well with him when he was governor. We worked together very well, and we would work together. I guess it looks like we're going to be the one having to rebuild it. But what happened there, I don't think there's anything that I've ever seen quite like it. And the insurance companies are going to have a big problem because you're talking about big, big dollars.
Mr. Cheney, so Biden pardoned Liz Cheney. What's your message for President Biden? He said he
Oh,
might.
I thought it was ridiculous that he did that, but we have more important things to talk about. Liz Cheney was, she lost in the Republican Party, as you know, in her state, by the biggest margin in the history of a politician running for Congress. She lost by like 42 points. Nobody's ever lost like that. So I don't care about Liz Cheney. I care about these people.
What does day one going to look like in the Trump administration?
Number one, we're closing the border. It's going to be closed very strongly, and it's going to be closed. And we're going to have to take people out that are criminals. We have people from jails from all over the world and from mental institutions. And as you know, they're going to have to be removed. And it's one of the reasons I won the election in a landslide. The people of this country don't want murderers walking down their farms or their streets or their cities. As you know, we had thousands of people that murdered other people that were in jail that were released into our country. Many of those people murdered more than one person, many of them, about 42% supposedly. We want them out of our country, and we're going to get a country back again, and we're going to be really governed by common sense. These are the principles of common sense. We're not going to be governed by stupid people. We're going to common sense. We're going to be respected all over the world again very soon.
President Trump, what do you would send them off?
It shouldn't be low high. Hey, Tony. It was hot. Right?
Right, I don't care about it. Yeah. I got to write a piece now.
No. Yeah. But I would rather have boom from the top because it's bouncing and it's creating a little whatever. I gotta sit on the tiny seat. I get it.
Step in there and I'll get out of your way.
She made a lot of minutes.
Well,
Can you
thank
move up? Can you move up, Senator?
Well, thank you all for being here. So I had just had an opportunity to visit with Robert Kennedy Jr. and we had some interesting conversations about my experience with his uncle, Teddy Kennedy, who was sort of the lion of the Senate back when I first got here, and what a larger-than-life personality he was. But we talked about a number of things, including his issues on food safety, his position on vaccines, which he told me he is not anti-vaccine. He's pro-vaccine safety, which strikes me as a rational position to take. And then we talked a little bit about our healthcare system, which is really sometimes described more as a sick care system. All of the financial incentives and other things that doctors and hospitals get is for treating people once they become sick. And obviously that's very expensive and creates a lot of misery for people who have to endure illnesses, many of which could be avoided with proper lifestyle changes and incentives. So it's going to be a huge challenge because it's a huge bureaucracy, Health and Human Services, but Look forward to working with him, and I intend to support his nomination. So my attitude is that about nominations generally is that President Trump won this election decisively. He's entitled to his team because that's the team that will help him follow through on the promises that he made on the campaign trail. And then those people will then be accountable to him to accomplish the goals that he has set out for them. And they serve at his pleasure. So if they're not doing the job that he wants them to do, then I presume that he'll find somebody else who is able to do that job. But I think the delays we're already beginning to see in this confirmation process are completely unacceptable. I know people say, well, it's a paperwork problem or the FBI background check isn't fast enough. Well, the FBI needs to work 24/7 round the clock to get these background checks done before the confirmation hearings. And it's completely unacceptable to say, well, it's a paperwork problem. We know if there's the will to get this done, it can be done, and in my view, it must be done. President Trump's entitled to his team. Democrats are not entitled to sabotage this president by denying him his cabinet, and I intend to do everything I can to see that they are speedily confirmed and certainly available as soon as possible, hopefully by January the 20th when he takes his hand off the Bible.
Senator, you said you talked about the issue of vaccines. He has very publicly linked vaccines to childhood autism. Did he take that position in there with you?
Well, no, we didn't talk specifically about autism. He's not the first person who's been concerned about any potential linkage to autism for vaccines. That's a very serious medical condition, as you know, that affects a lot of children, and so it's a serious concern. But I think what we've learned is that science is really the key, and getting the good science done is what's so important. What we've seen with COVID, for example, is where science can get hijacked by politics in a way that can be very misleading and undermine the public health. So I think all of those things are on the table. There shouldn't be any sacred cows, and we ought to continue the investigation, because you probably remember there are things that science told us you shouldn't do years ago that all of a sudden, we found out through additional studies in science that was wrong. And so I think all of those are subject to continued discussion and investigation.
Did you discuss his positions on abortion at all and his flip-flopping on that?
We didn't talk about that. My view is, as somebody who's pro-life, I will tell you that I agree with President Trump's position that this is a decision to be made by the states. That's what the Supreme Court basically said when it overruled Roe versus Wade. And that's the law of the land, and I expect him to follow the law.
Did you all talk about the Affordable Care Act and whether there are plans to repeal it?
We didn't talk specifically about that. We did talk, as I indicated, about how our healthcare system is we spend roughly 20% of our gross domestic product on healthcare. That's roughly 3 times what other established industrialized nations spend on their healthcare. So we spend a lot of money that frankly I think is misspent and should be spent more effectively in keeping people healthy rather than treating them after they become ill. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people with entrenched interests in the status quo, a lot of money to be made, but one of the things I'm hopeful is that he and President Trump will shake up the status quo and allow us to re-examine a lot of what currently exists to see whether it really makes sense.
Just to follow up on
you
that.
spoke a bit about the delay in processing some of these nominees, getting the paperwork through. In your role on the Judiciary Committee, have you spoken to the FBI at all to try to understand why these documents might be taking longer to come through than maybe you guys would like them to?
Well, it's unacceptable for the FBI or anyone else to basically sabotage President Trump's ability to get his cabinet and his team in place. I think around here for too long we said, well, it's a paperwork problem or the FBI problem. Well, we know how to fix those problems. they need to get to work, and they need to get it done on a timely basis, because the American people cast their ballot on November the 5th for Donald J. Trump, and they expect he and his team to be accountable day one on January the 20th when he's sworn into office. So any of this rigmarole about, paperwork delays or the FBI doesn't have time to get around to it is unacceptable.
You were here for Kavanaugh. How do you think the Hegseth hearing on Tuesday will compare intensity-wise?
Well, it's really up to the Democrats, I suppose. I mean, some of the Mr. Hegseth's history, I think, is much of it's been documented, so we know some of the areas that will be discussed. To me, the most important thing is how do we prevent World War III, and by that I mean how do we reestablish deterrence so that nobody wants to take on the United States or any of our allies. We've lost that. And to me, that's the most important issue to discuss with the Secretary of Defense nominee.
Do you have any concerns with any Trump nominees right now? Hegseth over his past allegations, or Gabbard, or meeting with Bashar al-Assad? Do they raise any red flags for you?
You mean would I choose the same people? It's really not my decision. It's President Trump's decision, and I think the American people, by electing him decisively, have put their trust in him and his choices. And we'll see. What time will tell how that turns out, whether they're doing the job that he wants them to do or whether they're able to satisfy the American people. But the Senate has an important role of advice and consent, but I don't view that as a veto over the president's mandate in terms of what happened on November the 5th or his ability to choose his own team.
On vaccines, did you talk about any policy changes? Like, does he want to change the way the FDA approves vaccines or the guidance around that or anything?
Well, we talked a little bit about, because I asked him, I said, what about some of the normal childhood vaccines? And he said, well, these are well tested and time tested for safety. And I asked about Operation Warp Speed, which is an extraordinary measure to try to create a vaccine to deal with the pandemic. And he said he's not anti-vax. He said he's been fighting to keep mercury out of fish, and nobody ever called him anti-fish. I thought that was a pretty good analogy. I think being pro-safety is the right position to be in, and I don't think we ought to accept the status quo without questioning it and whether it still makes sense or still scientifically valid.
But he said like he wasn't against the current child vaccine schedule or anything.
That's what he said.
Yeah.
Do you think he's walking back his views on vaccine to win over senators like yourself?
Well, I've never met the man before, and so I've never had a chance to ask him questions. I've seen things reported in the news, and with all due respect to our good friends in the Fourth Estate, I don't necessarily believe everything I read in the press, because you quote people who maybe have a self-interest or have an agenda who say wild and crazy things, and then they become sort of the accepted common knowledge, which is disassociated from the facts. So I'd rather go to the source, and that's why it's so important to meet these nominees and ask them directly. And we'll find out soon enough whether they're up to the job. But my point is that President Trump's entitled to his team absent extraordinary circumstances, and I intend to support his nominees.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for taking that.
How did it go today? Thank you all for coming. Very good. She's got my support 110%. One of the most important positions that President Trump's going to have under him in terms of getting our country back straight. And there's 4 or 5 people that I've met with that she will be working with. It's a good time to know that we're going to have people that's actually going to be for the United States of America and the citizens of America. One thing that we discussed was trust. Trust is what we have to have in this country, where our people, the people that pay the taxes, the citizens of this country, can understand we trust the people that's running the United States of America, especially our intel agency. So I'm 100% for Tulsi. She's going to be great, and look forward to her taking over in the very near future and going from there, and we're going to work with her very hard.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Great to see you. Thank you for your time and for your support. As we talked about, there are a number of serious national security threats that our country faces, and it's important that we all stand together to put the interests of the safety, security, and freedom of the American people first. So I'm grateful for your support and looking forward to continuing to meet with your colleagues over the next week or two.
Are you planning on meeting with further Democrats beyond, obviously, Senator Warner over the next week or two as well?
Yes. We've extended invitations to, obviously, all the Democrats on the committee and others not on the committee, and I look forward to meeting with all who choose to accept the invite.
When was the last time you spoke to the president-elect, and what has he told you about his priorities, if you're confirmed, as far as regaining that trust, of the intel community specifically?
I spoke to him yesterday, and he has made very clear, both himself as well as through his national security advisor and others, his priorities. Right now I'm focused on continuing to meet with senators, address any questions or concerns that they have, and talk about the interests of our country and how we look forward to being able to work together.
Have any Democrats indicated they're going to support you?
I won't speak for any senators.
Have they told you that?
I won't speak for any senators. I will allow them to make their own statements on their own account.
Have you heard concerns about experience within the intel sphere itself? We've heard concerns, like that from other senators. I'm just wondering if you've heard those things with your meetings from Democrats or others.
I don't want to disclose the contents of our conversations. My background on the Armed Services Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committees in Congress over 8 years, service in the military now for over 22 years, gives me a lot of the insight necessary to be able to go in and understand the serious threats we face and the essential function of our intelligence community to restore that trust and to get after ensuring the safety, security, and freedom of the American people.
How we really
Thank you. Over the line, who have criticized your stances on Russia.
Thank you, guys.
Strange between Trump and Pence there, but acting cordial, acting polite, shaking hands. Obama with Pence now, and former Vice President Al Gore there. So, like I said, Stephanie, we don't see these scenes very often. We'll see whether or not former President Obama and President-elect Trump are cordial and shake hands. They're seated right next to each other. A very, very frosty relationship between the two nonetheless.
And we do see them actually exchanging some conversation right there as they are seated next to one another. But it's interesting, and we've spoken about this, in times such as this, it brings people together on a human level. You can disagree with politics, but you set that aside to honor the person. And there is George W. Bush right there shaking hands and saying hello with Laura Bush there as well. So we are seeing, of course, a number of former presidents seated together, being cordial, as you said. But again, this is not a day or time to focus on the political nature, but perhaps more of the human nature. And we saw that with former President Jimmy Carter. He didn't necessarily agree politically with certain individuals, but looking beyond that to perhaps that human foundation that we all share.
Yeah, I just have to note for the American history buffs watching, you saw there the interaction between Al Gore and George W. Bush, of course, in that very heated election of 2000, Stephanie. Bush beating Gore by about 500 votes in a Supreme Court decision in Florida. And everyone is acting cordial. That is what American politics, when it is civil, is all about. You see the Clintons now in the front row. And so we're really seeing one or two generations of American politics all gathered in the same space, all gathered in the same room. It is truly remarkable, Stephanie. And, it's not morbid to say this, that funerals like this are really the only places we get to see this, other than inaugurations. Yes, inaugurations happen every 4 years. And you see there the Clintons,
Andrew,
the
I have
Bushes.
to ask you this. You know,
Looks
one
like
of our producers.
former First Lady Michelle Obama not in attendance.
And that's what I was gonna ask you
Not entirely sure why
about,
there, and then the
Andrew.
Trumps there.
Yes, that was what I was going to ask you about. One of our producers, Tania, did also note the absence of Michelle Obama right there, not seated next to her husband, former President Barack Obama. Is that something that we were expecting, or perhaps this is not? Is this a surprise or not a surprise? I think people might be a little surprised not to see her there next to her husband.
Yeah, we'll have to see if there's any reporting on it kind of after the fact. It could just be, a scheduling conflict. But this was not reported kind of going into the funeral. So we'll have to kind of check our sources there to see, what might explain the absence. But yeah, maybe we shouldn't look too much into that fact, though. And you see there, it looks like things are about to get underway. But it does look like the dignitaries are seated now in the front row, and then the family, of course, will
Andrew, I have a
be
question
seated,
for you.
and then the eulogizers will be seated there in those empty seats. We're still waiting for President Biden and the First Lady.
Andrew, I do have a question as we do await the service to get underway momentarily. How does one determine the seating? Do you know that? I mean, we see that certain former presidents are seated next to other presidents, but how does the seating chart work when it comes to a funeral service such as this? I think that's something perhaps we may not know, but I think our viewers might be curious. Is there a strategy to it? Is there a tradition behind it?
There's a strategy behind it. You can kind of tell now it goes kind of in descending order. The vice president there, the second gentleman, walking into the cathedral. So the highest ranking dignitaries sit up front and lower ranking dignitaries kind of file in there after. You see former vice presidents seated behind former presidents and kind of thereon and going on. So that's kind of the strategy, so to speak. Somewhat self-explanatory because you see in descending order Trump, Obama, Bush, Clinton, and the like. And so you see the vice president there, Harris, and the second gentleman. And just kind of think about this, the electoral acknowledgement of the 2024 election. Harris and Trump, I believe, possibly the first time they are in the same room since Harris's election loss and Trump's election victory. So, politics is very passionate. It's very raw. But to your point, Stephanie, in moments like this, tempers are put aside for at least a couple of hours to come together to show kind of a bipartisan front of unity, saying goodbye to former leaders like this. But no doubt, these are scenes, like I said, I'm going to repeat myself and reiterate that we just do not get very often here. The election was just now about 2 months ago. The inauguration coming up in 11 days. The Biden-Harris administration winding down. And the closing of one chapter, the opening of another. I just want to reiterate and repeat that. And that's what we're seeing on full display. Yes, the tributes, the celebrations, the mourning, but also just kind of the sheer underbelly and undertone of politics as well today.
Hello. Hi, good. Greg Gianforte with Montana Governor. So we have 22 Republican governors here tonight of the 27. We had a couple, they were getting inaugurated today, so they couldn't be here, and another one's got delayed by the snow. But we're really pleased to be here at the invitation of the president-elect. It's been a long period without cooperation from Washington, so we're looking forward to the new administration coming in. We have a lot of business to get done on behalf of our state, so we're just pleased to be here to meet with the president. Well, I think it's different depending on the state. I know for Montana, we've wrestled with overreach from the EPA, problems with other agencies, whether it's Interior with public lands. But I know each governor that's standing up here has expressed frustration. When President Trump was in office previously, we'd have periodic phone calls, regular interactions where we could express the concerns and really collaborate. We've had a number of situations with the current administration where it's been crickets. We haven't heard anything.
Your thought process now that J.D. Vance has officially said that he is going to resign tonight?
Sure. We certainly have been working on this for some time, and I'll have an announcement probably next week. I'm looking for someone, first of all, who will be a worker in the U.S. Senate. I spent 12 years there. I think I have a pretty good idea what it takes to be successful. I want someone who understands Ohio, who has a deep knowledge of our state. We need that strong advocate there. Also has to be someone who's willing to run in 2 years and then turn right around and run 2 years after that. So Ohio's a big state. That's a tough thing to do. Also, someone who can win a primary and who can win a general election in Ohio. So those are the kind of the main criteria.
Whether or not he wants to go to the Senate or run for governor in 2 years?
Well, I'm not going to get into that tonight. So. Thanks, everybody.
Governor DeSantis, just your reaction to Matt Gaetz mowing a gubernatorial bid?
I don't really have a reaction to it. I mean, it's so far away that for that race to happen. I think my thing is I had to do a special election to fill that seat because he resigned from the seat. I wish we had full strength in the House to help the president get his agenda done. That's where the fight is right now. Florida, the fight was in 18 here when we were at a crossroads. If you look now at the results across the state, the left is lying in ruins. The Democratic Party is on the mat. So we've got it handled here. I think the people need to be up there fighting for President Trump and to deliver on his mandate. And so any congressman should be wanting to go up there and do that. And we expect all our Florida congressmen to actually deliver on these promises.
Governor DeSantis, have you and President Trump spoken about the possibility of you serving as Secretary of Defense?
We speak frequently. We haven't really gone into any particulars on anything. I think we're looking forward to being able to be helpful in any way we can. Clearly, as governor, I think we'll have a better future these next couple of years than we've had the last 4. Our success in Florida has been in spite of the Biden administration, not because of it. Now I think we're going to get some good runway, and so I think that'll be really the substance of the conversation tonight.
Governor DeSantis, would you be interested in that job of Defense Secretary should the Texas nomination confirmation here in the seat next week?
So, I've not asked for any position. I've not been offered any position. I've got a great job. I think the president has a unique opportunity to deliver big wins for the American people. As part of that, his agenda, which I agree with wholeheartedly, on reconstituting the military away from the social agenda and towards being able to deliver lethal force, to be able to deter our enemies and achieve peace through strength, is vitally important. I want him to be able to succeed in that. I think he has the ability to succeed in that. I think he's very serious in succeeding in that. And just as somebody who served, yesteryear, I think the military culture has changed in the last 20 years, and I don't think it's been for the better. So there's a lot of work to do, and I think he's got a lot of great people in national security that are going to be helping him. I'll be rooting for his success, but in terms of anything for me, like I said, I haven't asked for anything, and I've not been offered anything.
Governor DeSantis, do you guys intend to get some counsel or run your selection by the president before making a choice on your selection for Senate?
Well, we speak frequently. I'll speak with him tonight. I'm going to be with him in a couple days after this. And obviously, the one thing I've told them is you're going to have somebody up there that's going to help you deliver on the mandate that you've received from the American people. I think that's very important. And I think that's what the people of Florida voted for. And I think that they deserve a United States Senate that's going to fight for those policies. And so that'll be something that'll be guaranteed. But we also got to have somebody that understands the state of Florida, understands some of our unique challenges and our unique needs, and is going to be able to be attentive to that. And then, of course, have an overall philosophy beyond just with this presidential election. This will be someone that could run in 2 years and then run after that and potentially be up there a long time. So you may be up there under Democrat presidents in the future. Hopefully not, but maybe. You may be up there under different Republican presidents. We want somebody that's got that solid philosophical foundation that's going to be true to the principles that I think have made this country great. So we'll be doing, incidentally, I mean, people have been asking me, there is no vacancy in the state of Florida in the United States Senate. I talked to Marco shortly after he got nominated. And his intention, and I think it was absolutely the right decision, is to resign effective on appointment as Secretary of State. That will likely be January 20th. Certainly, I don't think much later than that. And so we'll have somebody teed up, ready to go when the new administration begins. And so that will happen, just like I said it would, sometime in the middle of January.
Governor Youngkin, do you think it's helpful for President-elect Donald Trump to be attacking Governor Newsom in the middle of what we're seeing in California right now?
Well, first of all, a governor's primary responsibility is to go to work to keep their state safe. And I have to say, one of the things we talk about as governors all the time is preparing and responding and then recovering after a natural disaster. What's been happening in Los Angeles has been horrific, and I think first and foremost our hearts pour out to all of those folks who have lost their homes, lost their livelihoods, and are really being driven out. I also believe that there does need to be some action, and I think that collectively between federal governments and state governments, we all work together to address these things. But let me just go right back to it. What's happening in California right now is absolutely heart-wrenching and horrific. And I think we're going to need help from the entire country in order for them to recover.
Does anyone else want to speak to that? Because you all, as governors, obviously deal with emergencies. Often you have to work with the federal government. Sometimes it's your party, sometimes it's not. What do you think about the idea of President-elect Donald Trump criticizing a governor in the middle of a disaster?
Well, first of all, I mean, when Donald Trump was president, he responded very strongly to natural disasters. I can tell you he responded very positively in Florida, but he also responded favorably when there were Democrat governors. And I think he understands the importance of these situations. You know, I will note, I mean, you talk about, you know, what you're doing. I remember when we had our hurricanes this past hurricane season. We had Hurricane Helene, and Florida, we're locked and loaded for this. We respond. But then you go to North Carolina, and it was like a third world country all of a sudden. There was no sense of urgency from the federal government. I think the state government didn't do very well. And so I'm sending my assets up there to help rescue people. Florida State Guard is up there doing that. And I think the administration was asleep at the switch. Then Milton came, and they knew that they had suffered some political negativity of that. So I have Harris trying to pick a fight with me in the middle of Hurricane Milton, saying, ooh, he's not taking my calls. I tell you, she never called me in my whole tenure as governor on any natural disasters, and I'm not sure she's done very much on this one, even though she's there. So, you know, these things are go how they go, but I can tell you, and I'll say the same with Biden. I worked well with Biden during his time in natural disasters, and I worked well with Donald Trump. So I'm very confident as a state that knows we face these, that a Trump administration is going to be very strong and is going to be there for the people regardless of party.
Is it appropriate for the president-elect or a president to be criticizing?
Is it appropriate for people in your industry to try to create division and to try to create narratives anytime these things happen? Now, you're not as interested in doing that because Newsom is a D. If Newsom was a Republican, you guys would go you would have him nailed to the wall for what they're doing over there. And I know we've dealt with it. We just assume in Florida, anytime something happens, it's going to be politicized by the media. So you guys sitting in judgment of Donald Trump, I mean, excuse me, I think your track record of politicizing these things is very, very bad.
Okay, last question. Newsom should resign and that the wildfires are all his fault. So do you agree with those comments?
I remember when we had the Surfside Tower collapse, I had people from the Washington Post trying to blame me for it immediately without having any facts or anything. Oh, he didn't declare a state of emergency. First of all, state of emergency doesn't mean you can't
Biden
respond.
Didn't,
it's all that. Excuse me?
Biden did it. I think that's what she's saying.
Well, but what I'm telling you is you guys are trying to make an issue of it when I have watched from this seat. In fact, when I got elected governor, I was meeting with some of the other Republican governors, and what they would say is, hey, if you have a natural disaster, just know media's coming at you, they're going to do it. It's not the same. That mayor of LA, if that were a Republican mayor, I could only imagine what that would do. I mean, you know the fires are at high risk, and you try to go to Africa or wherever she was to go on some type of voyage. You should have been there preparing and doing that, and yet I don't see a lot of heat being directed in that thing. And so, you know, I'd like to see some balance on how this is done. You could criticize the president-elect, but I think you also have to hold these other people accountable, and I have not seen that.
So the Republican governor standing in front of you were thrilled to accept the president-elect's invitation to come here so that we can have a collaborative working relationship, which we have not had for 4 years. So thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
We are just about one moment away from the beginning of the funeral service for former President Jimmy Carter, and there we have aligned the surviving presidents. There's only been 45 in our nation's history, coming up on 45 anyway, in about 7 or 8 days from now. When we were watching this during the commercial break, and Dana, we were both observing that Donald Trump and Barack Obama have a lot to say to each other.
Yeah, they're having a
because they sure were.
I'm sure the lip readers will try to get a hold of that, but it is a chance for the President's Club. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to get together for a funeral, but this is in tribute to the former president, Jimmy Carter, who will be laid to rest later today. But the funeral first at the National Cathedral, which will be a beautiful ceremony and covered in full on Fox Business.
Think about this picture now. Kamala Harris there, Hillary Clinton. Bill Clinton was just in the hospital and looks no worse for the wear. They had a close-up shot of him a moment ago, and he looks good, and he looks healthy, and together they come together, and, well, they will honor the 39th president, and Joe Biden, the current president, will help deliver the eulogy, and we will certainly be available for that, to listen to his message today in Washington.
All right, and here we have the President of the United States, Joe Biden, and First Lady Jill Biden arriving into the National Cathedral for the beginning of this service. So we must be about to get underway as they take their seats.
It's a stunning place, whether there's a ceremony underway or not. Just a beautiful place in Washington, D.C. To visit and take some quiet time out. And we have watched so many moments together over the past several decades, where the nation has paused to recognize moments in American history, and today this is yet another one of those.
It is a momentous day in America. I mean, we have the breaking news out of Los Angeles. Hunter Biden, we saw just a few moments ago, apparently there was reports that his house is burned down there as well. Al Gore, former vice president as well, is there. Many of them had been a part of, at least in some way, Habitat for Humanity, one of the beautiful organizations that Jimmy Carter helped found in his post-presidency.
So there will be several tributes. I mentioned Joe Biden will deliver one of them. In a bit of an ironic twist here, in presidential history, some of the other tributes will be delivered by Steve Ford, who is the son of the late President Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford wrote a tribute to Jimmy Carter. They forged a friendship together in that presidential club, and Steve Ford will deliver that. No one's heard it yet. This will be the first time publicly. And then Ted Mondale will read a letter that was written by his father and the former Vice President Walter Mondale today.
You will also hear from James Carter. He is one of the many grandsons of President Carter, and Joshua Carter as well, and Jason Carter. So Jason, Joshua, and James, all grandchildren of President Carter, will have a chance to pay tribute to their late grandfather, who, and no doubt they loved very much.
The Honorable Andrew Young out of Atlanta, Georgia, is also there today, and I was watching him the other day in an interview and talking about his memories of Jimmy Carter, not just as a president, but also as a governor before he went to Washington, D.C. And then the years that he spent in his post-presidency. Remember, he left the presidency, he was 45 years young, which he had a long runway after that. Went into hospice almost 2 years ago, and had survived a long time on hospice under great care as well. And Andrew Young will deliver the homily today, so his message will certainly be poignant. The other thing I'd point out is that the choir is so stunning and the sounds are so beautiful. And we will hear the song Imagine, sung as a duet today by Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood. That's quite the pair.
It is certainly indeed. And the Carter family there, I believe that's who that is which was paying tribute there to and saying hello to President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden. Here we have Jimmy Carter, the late president, his casket about to be entered into the National Cathedral for the procession. Let's listen in here for a second.
This is quite the moment, and Dana, we remarked last hour, the last time we were there together was the funeral for George H.W. Bush, 41. And the memory I have from that day, not only was it cold like it is today, but how his son, 43, was leading the way for the family and his father into church that day.
And I remember his speech very well, and remember how stoic he was through the whole thing until the very end, because that was obviously a huge loss. They were very close, and the whole family was there as well. We have noticed that Barack Obama and it's President-elect Trump, I was going to say former President, but also President-elect Trump, having a chance to catch up there as they sit next to each other.
There are 11 pallbearers. All of them are Jimmy Carter's grandchildren. Some of them considered honorary, some will have a hand on the casket as it goes into the National Cathedral. And Brett Baer is still riding shotgun with us today. And Brett, we're kind of balancing a lot of stories today, and appreciate you coming back here. Think about Carter's life, U.S. Naval Academy, Annapolis, growing up on a peanut farm in Georgia, and then the time that he spent as president, very controversial, I would argue. You think about when his term in office ended and the American hostages who were held in Tehran for 444 days were released, and Ronald Reagan on January 20th, that day in 1981, ushered in a whole new era in American life. And even if you think about today, and if you open the New York Times, there is a long article today about how Democratic politicians, since Jimmy Carter, have had to defend their own service to America, their own commitment to strength. And they point out exclusively how Hillary Clinton repeatedly used the word strong and strength when she was trying to capture the White House in 2016. And the legacy of Jimmy Carter, for some, is a very complicated one, not just as president, but in his post-presidency also.
America usually does give a second chance to their presidents in terms of re-election, Brett. In Jimmy Carter's case, and then, of course, in Joe Biden's. Not the case in President-elect Trump coming back for a second term.
As you look at that image of the living presidents, you know, these are moments. They only happen every so often, as you mentioned, 2018, the last time. And I think one of the things about Carter's legacy, and we can talk about all the policies and we can talk about the criticism, but there was also this humility, this sense after Watergate and Vietnam that that's what the country wanted. He was not afraid to talk about his faith. And he was a very religious man, an evangelical Baptist. He talked about being a born-again Christian on the campaign trail. And I think you'll hear a lot of that in this service today, looking back at how solid a religious man he was, and he wasn't afraid to talk about it.
Brett, when you look at the presidents assembled here, Donald Trump, the cameras were on him almost exclusively from every network as he entered church a moment ago. And Dana and I were talking about how much he and Barack Obama had to talk about. And maybe we need to get a good lip reader in here
Friendly so.
tell us what that conversation was all about, Brett.
Yeah, and you know, it's just stark. You see Vice President Harris there in the front row, and obviously Barack Obama and all that happened in the election and all that was said in the election. But these moments go past the politics. This is about honoring one of a very small group of people who've been president of the United States. And it only happens every so often as you look at the president and the vice president there.
And in 11 days, they will gather again, Brett.
They'll gather again for the inauguration, and there are all kinds of things. But America, like America did in 1981, is turning the page from Joe Biden to President-elect Trump, soon to be President Trump, like it did from Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan. It's a big shift.
But one thing also I would add is I'm reminded of when Obama came in, as we watched the casket come into the National Cathedral there. You know, America shows the world over and over again that we might have really tough campaigns and there might be some really strong words said against each other, but we can come together like this over and over, unlike most other countries in the world.
Just look at this picture here, Dana. Screen left, you got Al Gore. Right in front of him, you got George Bush. They fought it out for 37 days in Tallahassee in late 2000. Next to Al Gore is Mike Pence, who has distanced himself considerably from his former boss, Donald Trump. And in front of Donald Trump is Doug Emhoff and his wife Kamala Harris, who were just vanquished in November. And I just, Brett, I mean, to Dana's point, this is quite remarkable. And it's one of those moments when people say, this is what makes America great. You know, these people compete at a political level. They have very strong differences in how they believe the country should be run and what sort of force we should be around the world. But at least for this moment, for this day, they are, they're like fraternity brothers, Dana. The way they look at each other and smile as you see Trump and Obama in the picture there.
Thank you very much. So it's an honor to have the press, and these are people that aren't timid, they're not afraid of the press. If you'd like to ask a couple of questions, you may. We had a very beautiful day celebrating a very nice man, a good man, great humanitarian, Jimmy Carter's funeral. And thought it was a beautiful service and it went very well. And we had some very good victories today, as you probably heard. Go ahead, any questions?
President Trump, just a few minutes ago, the Supreme Court ruled that they are not going to slow down the sentencing. It's on for tomorrow. Now what?
Well, they called for an appeal, and as you know, they acknowledged what the judge said about no penalty, and there's no penalty. But we're going to appeal anyway, just psychologically, because frankly, it's a disgrace. It's a judge that shouldn't have been on the case. He's a highly conflicted judge, and they called for an appeal. So I read it, and I thought it was a fair decision, actually. So I'll do my little thing tomorrow. They can have fun with their political opponent. As you know, I'm under a gag order from a judge. This is the first. This was an attack of a political opponent. And if you take a look at it, I'm not supposed to be talking about it, so I won't. I'm the first president and probably one of the first candidates in history that's under attack with a gag order, where I'm not allowed to speak about something. And they ought to find out what that's all about. And this is a long way from finished. And I respect the court's opinion. I think it was actually a very good opinion for us because you saw what they said. But they invited the appeal, and the appeal is on the bigger issue. So we'll see how it all works out. I think it's going to work out well. We beat Jack Smith. He's back, I hope, at The Hague, but I don't think he should be there either. He puts people in very bad positions, like giving people death penalties. I will tell you, Jack, he is a disgrace. We won all of those cases. We won most of the other cases, or they're limping along. We've had a lot of lawfare. These are all people that understand what's going on here very badly. This was an attack on the Republican Party. This was an attack on the Republican candidate who just won an election by record numbers, the highest number of Republican votes by far ever gotten. And we won all swing states, 7 swing states. We won the popular vote by millions of people. And that was the real vote. And I said it a long time ago, the real vote is that. And they tried to stop that from happening. They tried to stop this election from happening, or to bloody somebody up so badly they couldn't win. And the people got it. And again, we won by the largest number. Nobody's ever seen anything like that. It was conclusive. It was a massive, they say, the most consequential election in 129 years. And these people, the people know everything that you're asking. They've been studying this for 2 years as it went along. And hopefully it'll never happen again, an attack on a political opponent. So Peter will be appealing the decision. They're asking for an appeal. And that's on the fact, on what's going to happen, much more importantly than tomorrow.
Off the top, you mentioned the Carter funeral today. What were you talking to Barack Obama about?
It did look very friendly, I must say.
I thought you guys hated each other.
I didn't realize it, how friendly it looked. I saw it on your wonderful network just a little while ago before I came in, and I said, boy, they look like two people that like each other. And we probably do. We have little different philosophies, right? But we probably do. I don't know, we just got along. But I got along with just about everybody on that. We met backstage, as you know, before we went on. And I thought it was a beautiful service, but we all got along very well, which is good.
In California, what specifically do you think Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass could have done differently to prepare for this $50 billion fire?
And, we have great governors in this room, and if you look at the way their states, I think I can say without exception, anybody doing poorly in here? I mean, without exception, we have great governors here that have done a great job with their states. And I don't think, and you'll probably, if there's a weak link, you're going to find it, and you're going to be asking the next question to that person. Gavin Newsom had an opportunity to have millions of gallons a week, a day, millions and millions of gallons come down from the north. And I was able to get him federal approval from that, from the Department of Commerce of all departments. I didn't realize it would go through Commerce. I would have thought environmental, but it goes through Commerce. I got all of the approvals, and he said, I don't want to sign it. I don't want the water. We don't need the water. I said, you need the water. Your reservoirs are empty, the whole place. You need the water. That was 5 years ago. And I had it all done. The work was all done. We sent it to him. He refused to sign it. And if you noticed yesterday, the hydrants were empty. They didn't have any water, many of them. They said 20%, but now I just heard 50%, and now none of them have water, and that fire's still raging. He turned that down. I was going to give him unlimited water. It would come down, it really comes down from the north, way up north, including parts of Canada. It's so much water that they wouldn't know what to do with. Just the opposite would have happened. And that's the reason that this happened. He wouldn't do what we wanted. And we're going to force that upon him now. But it's very late, because I think it's one of the great catastrophes in the history of our nation. This is not just in Los Angeles. I've never seen anything like that, devastation. And we're talking about homes that cost $200, $300, $400 million. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. People that, and very influential people worldwide. I don't know that they ever go back either, because they weren't happy with California. They weren't happy with Gavin Newsom. They weren't happy with their whole lifestyle there, with the crime being out of control, all the other problems. They were not happy. And it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not they're going to build, or whether somebody else is going to build and build a much lesser home. These were the most expensive homes outside of Palm Beach County. I see a list outside of Palm Beach. These were the most expensive homes anywhere in the world. And I think a lot of them are just not going to go back and build it. Plus, they don't want to be part of a construction site. They don't want to, they're building a home, another one's building, they're building in front of them, behind them, alongside of them. So I think it's a tragedy. I think it's an incredible tragedy. It's also a tragedy for a tax base And the governors know exactly what I'm talking, and I'd like to hear anybody talk about that. But if you're the governor of a state and you lost thousands of very rich people that were paying a lot of taxes and weren't happy about it, and weren't happy about what's happened to California, which has all the advantages of greatness, but they've had horrible politicians. I think that Gavin is largely incompetent, and I think the mayor is largely incompetent, and probably both of them are just stone cold incompetent. What they've done is terrible. Would anybody have a comment on that? Because when you talk about losing the tax base, you're losing a lot of, you're going to lose a lot of those people permanently. Those people pay billions of dollars in taxes. Governor, what about you?
We got some great property in Louisiana.
Well, they'll be moving to a lot of your states. They'll be moving to Florida, I can tell you, I know that. But they're going to be moving to, you're going to pick up a lot, Texas. So it's a rough situation. I've never seen, I think it's one of the great catastrophes in the history of our country. Not even believable.
President Biden's term, almost over. Before he goes, there's talk that he might trade a Gitmo al-Qaeda detainee, Mohammed Rahim, for 3 American hostages held by the Taliban. Should he do that?
Well, I haven't looked at it. I will be looking at it. They're showing me tomorrow morning. They're showing me that there's a trade on. And trades, I have not been in favor of the trades they've made, but I'll be taking a look tomorrow. We'll announce something tomorrow.
Don Jr. and some of your team just got back from Greenland. What's the price tag?
Well, maybe no price tag. Look, we're going to have to see what happens because Denmark, we need this for national security. We need Greenland very badly. You look at the Russian ships, the China ships, they're all over the place. They're, surrounding. Now, they have for a long time. That's a lane. But we need that for national security. So I don't know that Denmark has any right, title, and interest, and we're going to find that. But I can tell you, you saw the clips that were released. The people of Greenland would love to become a state of the United States of America. We were greeted with tremendous love and affection and respect. The people would like to be a part of the United States. Now, Denmark maybe doesn't like it, but then we can't be too happy with Denmark, and maybe things have to happen with respect to Denmark having to do with tariffs. Because they have to do this, I think, for the free world. We need that to protect the free world. Is very important, and getting more important every year.
When you were with all the Republican senators yesterday in Washington, which of your nominees do they think are going to have the hardest time getting confirmed?
So we had a great meeting with almost every senator, Republican senator, and I would say that first it was a love fest. This is a love fest too, I believe. I'll let you know in about an hour. But this is pretty much a love fest. I mean, the governors aren't exactly chopped liver, right? This is a group of people that have done a phenomenal job, and especially when you see what's going on in Los Angeles and all. You look at the way they've run their states, it's incredible. I talk about it all the time, the top 25 states, and I don't believe we have any in the list of crime. So every one of them is a Democrat-run state. We want to get along with the Democrats. I'm trying to be nice. We're going into a new term. It's going to be a great time for, I'm going to call it the golden age. I believe we have a chance at the golden age of America, but I have to tell you, you look at the crime, it's all on the shoulders of Democrats and the way they run their states. And if these people ran those states, same people, same everything, but you put these people in those states, you wouldn't have crime like that at all.
We've been watching over the last couple weeks, a lot of CEOs, including some who censored you 4 years ago, have been coming down here basically to kiss the ring. Did they change or did you change?
Well, maybe we all changed. I think they've gained a lot of respect. I think they looked at the mandate that we got. As you know, we won the popular vote, as I said. We won all 7 swing states. They said, well, if Trump would win, I had to win 3 because I had a lot of early voting going on, and we had to win 3, and we won all 7. And we won them by a lot. We didn't win them by a little. We won them by a lot. And we won the popular vote by a lot. I think that had an effect. I also think it's like, let's get something done. You look at what happened with Facebook today and yesterday, what they announced. That was a big concession from them. I mean, they went from I call them the unlocked boxes. They call them lock boxes. I call them the unlocked boxes because they seem to be unlocked a lot of times. But you went from the unlocked boxes into a statement yesterday that's really talking about free speech. What a difference that is. And So we appreciate that, but I think they've gained a lot of respect. We've had everybody. Jeff Bezos came, Bill Gates came, Mark Zuckerberg came. Many of them came numerous times. The bankers have all come. Everybody's coming. I haven't had anybody saying anything bad about me. I'm not used to it. But a lot of it's respect. I think they respect the Republican Party. The Republican Party has become a much bigger party. It's become a party for the worker. You know, if you look at all of the union votes that I got, and when I say I, it's really all of us together because it's a whole thing. But we won the Teamsters, we did great with the auto workers, we did, you know, all heavily union, and non-union states we won by a lot. Florida is an example, we won by millions of votes, the highest vote ever gotten. And so it's been a great period of time.
A ton of world leaders have called you as well. We understand still no call with Putin. Is that a day one or week one call that you want to have?
He wants to meet. And we're setting it up. President Xi, we've had a lot of communication, and we have a lot of meetings set up with a lot of people. Some have come, but I'd rather wait till after the 20th.
And when you say meet with Putin or meet with Xi, do you guys want to have some kind of a summit, or are they going to come here?
To be determined, but President Putin wants to meet. He's said that even publicly, and we have to get that war over with. That's a bloody mess. Soldiers are being killed by the millions. I looked at some very graphic pictures yesterday. The soldiers that are being killed, you know, it's a flat field. The only thing that stops a bullet is a body. These are it's a very, very flat land. And the soldiers are fighting, and they are dying by the hundreds of thousands. And not to mention the towns and the cities which were, you know, largely demolished. And there are a lot of people in the big surprise, and it's going to be a very unpleasant surprise, is how many people were killed in that war. It's much higher than the press is reporting. You know, when a building comes down, these are big buildings, they're 2 and 3 blocks long, different kind of construction. They're long and not that tall in many cases, but they're 20 stories. But when a building like that comes down and they say nobody was injured, no, a lot of people were killed. I think the numbers are going to be much higher. And that's a war that would have never happened if I were president, and it's a war that I'm going to try really to stop as quickly as I can. The number of people dying on a daily basis, and I get the reports every single day, and largely soldiers at this point, but the number of people, both Russia and Ukraine, it's staggering.
When you threatened tariffs on Canada a couple weeks ago, Justin Trudeau rushed down here. He wanted to make nice. Now he's on the way out. Is that what you wanted?
I didn't think he was going to quit. He probably saw the numbers. Look, I called him Governor Trudeau because they should be the 51st state, really. It would make a great state. And the people of Canada like it. They pay lower taxes. They have virtually no military. They have a very small military. They pay less than 1%. They're about the lowest payer in NATO. They're supposed to pay much more. They haven't been paying. They have a lot of problems, and I was with Wayne Gretzky. I said, Wayne, would you like to be the governor of Canada? I can't imagine anybody doing any better than Wayne. Wayne was not too interested, but I think he probably would have liked statehood. He's a friend of mine. He's a great guy. He's the great one. We call him the great one, right? He's a great hockey player. But I will say this. I think that there's, you know, it was stated pretty strongly a couple of weeks ago about Canada, and people laughed, and now they're all saying, well, it's very interesting. And I say from the standpoint of the United States, we're subsidizing Canada $200 and $250 billion a year. We have massive deficits. They've taken about 20% of our car business. I'd rather do it here. We could put tariffs on that. We don't have tariffs on them yet, but that will happen. But they've taken about 20% of our car business. I'd rather have it done in Detroit or have it done in South Carolina or any other state that does cars, and we have a lot of them. We don't need Canada for that. We don't need Canada for lumber because we have big forests that we have, you know, not utilized. In some cases, they're protected, which I can take that protection off. And you take down a tree and you grow a better tree, and that's, you know, pretty common. But we don't need anything. We don't need their fuel. We don't need their energy. We don't need their oil and gas. We don't need anything that they have. And I said to Trudeau, I said, why are we subsidizing you $200 and $250 billion a year. He said, I really don't know. And I said, well, I don't know either. I said, what would happen to Canada if we didn't? He said, Canada would be obliterated if that happened. I said, then Canada should be a 51st state. And that's where we are now.
A story that kind of disappeared very suddenly. Do you have any idea whatever happened to the drones?
What happened to drones?
Well, you had said that you knew you thought the government knew what was happening with these drones over New Jersey. There were some by Bedminster.
I don't know. They're over Bedminster a lot. So
what happened?
I'm going to give you a report on drones about one day into the administration, because I think it's ridiculous that they're not telling you about what's going on with the drones. And it's not only with me. Glenn was telling me today that in Virginia they have drones all over the place too, and nobody's reporting it. I don't know why they're not. Do you want to say something about that?
Just one quick comment, which is we are home to the largest naval base in the world in Quantico, and we house a lot of the SEAL teams and have a huge national security infrastructure. And now for 2 years running, we have had drone incursion over secure airspace, and we still don't know why. And I think that's absolutely unacceptable. And I think President Trump and the new leadership coming in, I think will work diligently to understand who's behind this and what we do in order to stop the digital surveillance of all of our secure infrastructure.
Is it dangerous?
Well, I can tell you this. While we were dealing with a terrorist attack in New Orleans, we had drones being flown over our nuclear reactors in Louisiana. And we brought that attention to the FAA. We've been asking the FAA to give these states the ability to mitigate these drones. And it's sitting on some bureaucrat's desk. And that's real.
Nobody knows. They don't want to talk about it. Go ahead, Governor. You were saying.
I was just going to say we have drones in Wyoming flying over our infrastructure as well. And it's incredibly frustrating that we not only have no way of knowing what it is, but nobody knows how to deal with them.
They don't want to talk about it, and nobody knows why. They don't want to talk about it. That could be us sending drones. I hope that's the case. Us doing it and doing research, and maybe they don't want to talk about it from that standpoint. I hope it's not an enemy, but we're going to find out on the 21st, the day after. You have to give me a little time for the inauguration, but shortly thereafter we'll give you a report on it. We'll tell you exactly what it is. They know, and it's very strange that they aren't talking about it. Peter, thank you very much. Does Biden do it? I mean, does he do this kind of a news conference?
This is my longest ever interview of a president.
Yeah, well, the longest ever before this was one question, and it would rush you out of the room. Right? We have nothing to hide. Thank you all very much.
Would your client like to be heard?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. This has been a very terrible experience. I think it's been a tremendous setback for New York and the New York court system. This is a case that Alvin Bragg did not want to bring. He thought it was, from what I read and from what I hear, inappropriately handled before he got there. A gentleman from a law firm came in and acted as a district attorney, and that gentleman, from what I heard, was a criminal or almost criminal in what he did. It was very inappropriate. It was somebody involved with my political opponent. Part of the records that we're talking about, they're saying, I just noticed where he said I was falsifying business records. Well, the falsification of business records, as they said, was calling a legal expense in the books where everybody could see them, a legal expense. In other words, that legal fees or legal expense were put down as legal expense by accountants. They weren't put down by me, they were put down by accountants. I didn't call them construction, concrete work. I didn't call them electrical work. I didn't call them any. They called a legal fee or a legal expense, and for this, I got indicted. It's incredible, actually. Now, if you look, my attorney alluded to it, the top legal scholars and legal pundits in this country, the ones that are quoted all the time on television, that are making their views felt, and highly respected people, have said, everyone, virtually everyone that I know of, I haven't seen any to the contrary, not one, and none of these people are not exactly friends of mine, to put it mildly. but they all said this is a case that should have never been brought. It's an injustice of justice. Very respected Jonathan Turley, Andy McCarthy, Judge David Rifkin, a wonderful man who just passed away, by the way, Greg Jarrett, Ellie Honig from CNN, of all places. CNN said that. Paul Ingratian, Alan Dershowitz. They all said this is not a case that should be brought. It's not, think about it, legal expenses are down as legal expenses, and I get indicted for business records. Everybody should be so accurate. It's been a political witch hunt. It was done to damage my reputation so that I'd lose the election, and obviously that didn't work. And the people of our country got to see this firsthand because they watched the case in your courtroom. They got to see this firsthand, and then they voted, and I won and got the largest number of votes by far of any Republican candidate in history, and won, as you know, all 7 swing states, won conclusively all 7 swing states, and won the popular vote by millions and millions of votes. And they've been watching your trial, so they understood it. I wasn't allowed to use the lawyer-client privilege or the reliance on counsel. I had a lawyer that made this deal, and he admitted that. And he was also a totally discredited person. We weren't allowed to use the information from the Southern District that totally discredited him. It wasn't allowed to be put in. And that was terrible, unbelievable. And this is a man who's got no standing. He's been disbarred on other matters, unrelated. And he was allowed to talk as though he were George Washington. But he's not George Washington. He shouldn't have been allowed. The Southern District did a book of approximately 28 pages where I've never seen anything like it. They excoriated him. You wouldn't let it be put into evidence. So he was able to testify as a witness, and I think it's a disgrace to the system. I was under a gag order. I'm the first president in history that was under a gag order where I couldn't talk about aspects of the case that are very important. I guess I'm still under, so probably I won't do it now. I assume I'm still under a gag order. But the fact is that I'm totally innocent. I did nothing wrong. They talk about business records, and the business records were extremely accurately counted. I had nothing to do with them. That was done by an accountant or bookkeeper who I think gave very credible testimony and was corroborated by everybody that was asked. And with all that's happening in our country today, with a city that's burning to the ground, one of our largest, most important cities burning to the ground, with wars that are uncontrollably going on, with all of the problems of inflation and attacks on countries and all of the horrible things that are going on, I got indicted over calling a legal expense a legal expense. It was called a legal expense. I just want to say I think it's an embarrassment to New York, and New York has a lot of problems, but this is a great embarrassment. I believe that this and other cases that were brought, as you know, the DOJ is very much involved in this case. That's because that's the political opponent they're talking about. The DOJ is very involved. You have a gentleman sitting right there from the DOJ who was from the DOJ's office. He was also involved with the New York State Attorney General's case. And he went from there to here. He went around and did what he had to do. He got them to move on me. But in the meantime, I won the election in a massive landslide. And the people of this country understand what's gone on. This has been a weaponization of government. They call it lawfare. Never happened to any extent like this, but never happened in our country before. And I'd just like to explain that I was treated very, very unfairly. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
I'm Steve Doocy. I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.